All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Cash Flow Amigos Live. Today I'm joined by Stoic. Stoic, you there, man?
Hey, yep, I can hear you.
Great to hear, brother. How's everything going with you, man? Happy Saturday.
Good, man. Yeah, thanks. Is my audio okay? I had some issues earlier this week with it.
It sounds perfect. I'd actually like to ask you the same for myself.
Yep.
Does mine sound good? No static?
No, you're sorted
Good, bro. I always started off like that because there's nothing worse than a stream with like bad audio. So,
for sure.
but yeah, man. Well, I'm really excited to have you on, bro. Thank you so much for just kind of communicating with me like offline and being able to just let me know that you'd be available to come on. I know it's a Saturday, so we're just gonna get straight to it, brother. And of course, I have you on because I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about the on and off ramp that OX Coast is building. So to be clear, you're Stoic, right? Stoic OX, but the team is called OX Coast, right?
Yep. On Twitter, it's 0x Coast. Unfortunately, on Telegram, it's Coast 0x.
0X, right?
The brand's really just Coast, but
Got it.
our intention with the branding originally was to just create the impression of something that is kind of like hands off, like coasting to financial freedom or coasting to gains, or you
I
know,
like it.
as simple as that. There was a double entendre there with us living on the coast, which is kind of nice, but that's kind of where it came from.
Cool, man. Yeah, I wanted to ask because I thought the 0X Coast account was a person. So I saw a stream the other day that you said that it's actually a team, it's a development team. So it's really good to know that. And I mean, yeah, you're the person that seems that you're it seems to be like you're the go-to person to talk to when it comes down to the project information. So, for me, I was able to learn a little bit about it, but I definitely still have a couple questions in regards to it. What is the product, right? Like, how does it work? What's this idea that you guys have coming to the table?
Yeah, sure. So we created and or in the process of creating a fiat on ramp for Pulse Chain that is a direct fiat on ramp. It's a little bit difficult to do something like that without also creating a stable coin. There are ways to do it. Like you could, for example, like sell NFTs on chain and then have them be redeemable in some way. So you could do something like that. But in our experience, the best thing to do is just have on ramp facilities, stable coin backed by the one-to-one asset in the FDIC insured bank account, and then
Yeah.
off ramp facilities. And really, by doing that, you create the simplest way for people to get economic value on and off chain, assuming, of course, that it's coming from a bank account, right? Like we're making the assumption a little bit here that new economic energy to Pulse Chain, um, like there's already a way to do this if you're changing from Ethereum, right? You can use Richard Hart's bridge. I think it's
Correct.
pulseramp.com. So
Mhm.
you can go do that if you already have assets on chain. But if you're trying to move assets from TradFi or from the real world or sell some stocks or use a 401k, then you still have to get it onto chain somehow. And there aren't very many ways to do this, and there certainly aren't any for Pulse Chain yet. So that's what we're trying to create is a frictionless get money from my bank account onto chain and do something with it as fast as possible product.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, a lot of people talk about it coming to fruition. I mean, ultimately, you guys are actually taking action on it. And I remember you mentioned in regards to the custody of the funds that are going to be held by the on and off ramp. How would that work, right? Like, if I have a U.S. bank account, right, and I wanted to, let's say, for example, send my money to this on ramp, essentially, what would that process look like? Like, how would it be from step A to step, you know, I gotta say Z ultimately, right? Um, from me putting money in, getting my asset, and then being able to take it out.
Okay, so I have to split custody into two different things because even
Yeah,
though we use the word custody and on chain and in the community, we tend to think of which Ethereum address is the asset in, right? That's not how banks think about custody. And so they
hmm,
use the term to describe the ownership of the fiat in the bank account. And so when we're talking about custody in a fiat on ramp, we're actually talking about two different things simultaneously with the same word. So what I mean by that is when you're doing the on ramp and you're moving money from your bank account to, for all intents and purposes, the shared bank account or the Coast bank account,
right.
that custody has to be performed by a financial institution. So it has to be an FDIC insured bank account. We have a banking partner that provides this to us. But the way that we've structured it is you take money from your bank account and it goes into a shared bank account, but it is allocated to you on a ledger. And what this means is that multiple people can have assets in the same account, and instead of creating multiple accounts for different people. So it's a mechanism that financial institutions have provided to new technology layers, to not necessarily decentralized finance, but financial applications generally. So like this is something that you would do if you were using like Wealthfront or Betterment or any of those like robo investing platforms or
Got it.
robo,
So it's
robo.
an existing system. Like there are other products that use or businesses that use this type of model.
Yes, exactly. And it's also something that you would do, like an FBO bank account or a for the benefit of bank account is something that
Hmm.
you would use if there was like an inheritance situation going on, or if you were like holding assets for a person. Let's say you were a like a custodian or a person who had custody rights to a child, and you were trying to hold on to assets for them for the future when they turned 18, you would use an
Hmm.
FBO bank account where you're like the administrator, but you're not the beneficiary of the bank account. You don't own the funds. You just
Right.
administer for them for the person who has the financial interest. So that's kind
Understood.
of how the mechanism works.
Got it.
So on the on ramp, sorry. So you take money from your bank account, you put it in the FBO. The FBO triggers the ledger to allocate your resources to you in the ledger, and then via a webhook, it goes and it mints, or sorry, it allocates the stablecoin for you so that you can mint it. So there's a key thing there, like a key difference between a person who's a money transmitter and a person who's like a tech or a technology layer that allows an individual user to mint their own stablecoin,
Hmm.
right? If in the case of some products, you send the money to a shared bank account, but then that particular entity sends you stablecoin to your address. Well, in that instance, that person is operating as a money transmitter. We are not going to do that. And so that we're not a money transmitter, basically what you have to do is you take your money from your bank account, you send it to the FBO, and it's the system allocates it to you, but then you still have to perform a function where you mint your stablecoin against the contract. And
Got it.
that's the key thing there, right? Like, so we've heard that from Richard in Richard Hart when we've talked about, Hex not being a security, for example, right? You mint your own rewards, you stake your own period of time. It's all on you to perform functions against a smart contract. Same kind of thing with the fiat on ramp. You have to come back and perform an action and mint your own stable for you, but the contract just knows how much you're allowed to mint. Kind
To
of the
mint,
same way
correct.
it works. Yeah.
All right, cool. So, all right, so now I have my money in. I'm able to mint my stable coin, and then from there, it's easily swappable for any other asset, right? So I can go from this new stable coin, which, if I'm not mistaken, what's the ticker symbol for it again that you guys set?
It's CST right now, code
CST.
stablecoin. Yeah.
Got it.
So we had a choice here when we were like, anytime you're designing a product that interacts between TradFi and on chain, you have to make trade-offs in your product design based on legislative frameworks. And so we made a trade-off in the business model saying, look, we have to avoid being a money transmitter or a broker dealer. And
Mhm.
so, on the off chance that Pulse was ever considered a security, we would want to make sure that we're not providing a way for people to buy a security, because then we'd be a securities broker dealer.
Right.
So, you will not find an ability to swap from CST to Pulse on the Coast website, except for an integration or a front end framework that would display the PulseX exchange. So,
Perfect.
yeah, so like you're not going to be able to buy Pulse from us. You won't
Yeah,
be
it
able
would
to
all
sell.
have to be completely decentralized, essentially. Like you'd have to use another swapping mechanism, but it can't be through you.
Exactly, exactly. So
Correct.
you'll have to interact with that smart contract. We're not going to do it. So we are not like Coinbase in this sense, right? We don't
Right.
custody your asset in fiat. We don't custody your asset on chain, and we don't sell you a portion of our pulse from our float and then make fees on it. It's just not something that we're going to do. So
Got it.
yeah, it's as close to you mint your own stablecoin and you do your own things in the environment as we can possibly get. So like minimal counterparty risk is really the idea.
Yeah, it's really important. I'm happy you guys are that you're mentioning this because ultimately, I mean, these are things that do essentially create a cause for concern in the future, in the sense of how you there can be some repercussions for the things that you guys are trying to innovate and do. So it's good that you guys are thinking ahead. And so, all right, so now I have my CST in my wallet. I can send it to another wallet. Let's say like my MetaMask. I can swap. I can do everything I want to do. Let's say fast forward a couple years. Um, I want to maybe liquidate some of my Pulse chain and I swap it in for for CST stablecoin. Now I want an off ramp. How would that process look like?
Yeah, so in the example that you're describing, you would actually already have an account with us because you would
Okay.
have used the on-ramp at some point.
All right.
Now, assuming you're using the same Pulse address, this would be very easy. There would be an extra step if you had changed Pulse addresses because you would have to link your new Pulse address to the DApp so that we could do this properly. But assuming you're using the same one, all you would do is come to the DApp. You would say how much stablecoin you were going to burn. You would burn it by just sending it to the burn address, and then the website or the DApp itself, sorry, would read that transaction with a webhook, and it would then allocate CST from the general fund in the FBO bank account back to your portion. And then
Mhm.
you would have to similarly perform another function, kind of like when you minted your own stablecoin. In this case, you would have to make the decision or trigger something that would withdraw your funds back to your bank account. So it's not totally automated. You still have to do another step, but
Right.
basically you choose how much you send to the burn address. You wait a few minutes for confirmation, and then you
Mhm.
can choose which bank account you withdraw your fiat currency to.
Got it. And then the withdrawing process, like that's normal. Like subject to like normal banking wait times, right? Like 3 to 5 business days. Or
Yeah,
is there like a instant option, for example? Like I know Coinbase sometimes you almost get it like same day. Is there any way you guys can work on like reducing that, or how is that looking?
yeah, there'll be options. So the payment processor that we're looking at using right now has a direct bank-to-bank integration for US customers.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to be a different answer depending on when you are. But let's assume you're in the US. Because you'll be able to link a bank account directly, it will probably be same day. And if not, maybe the next day. It kind of depends. Like if you do it on a Friday evening, I don't expect
Yeah,
you'll
you'd
get
have to wait the
much.
weekend more
Yeah.
than likely, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just standard TradFi stuff that you have to deal with, unfortunately.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it should be same day. There is the potential that it's slightly longer in the case of customers that have a higher risk profile. So, like, if you, for example, used the on ramp and you put in $1,000, and you come back to the off ramp with 4 million and try and use it all at once, it'll probably trigger some fraud detection that will maybe place a hold on it. I can't say exactly how that'll work, but it's more than likely that would be the case because it would be an unusual transaction volume for you.
Right.
So there are things like that to also consider. But in general terms, yeah, like you'll get it within a couple of days.
Understood. And all right, so I mean that's fairly simple. I mean, I understand the on and off process. I mean, I think what you guys are doing is pretty cool, and you guys have everything kind of worked out for the most part. One thing I did also want to mention: this is a KYC type of deal, right? Where you would have to essentially, you know, give you guys your like our personal information for you guys to hold. My question is, as far as like security goes, like, I know a lot of people in the crypto community, they feel some type of way about giving anybody any type of information. Most people don't even, like to show their real names out here. How do you guys feel like you're gonna be able to handle that? What type of security do you guys have in place in order to keep all this information safe?
Yeah, that's really easy actually, but good question. We don't actually store any of it. So
Hmm.
the information is sent directly to the banking provider and they actually hold it. So even though you're operating through the Coast website and the Coast DApp, you are actually the beneficiary of the funds at the bank account. So the bank holds your information. And similarly, when you do KYC, though you'll put it through our forms and it'll be sent to the KYC check company, which is actually the payment processing company too.
Hmm.
Even though it's sent to them, we don't store a copy of it anywhere. So
Got it.
it'll go to them and then they will return an eligibility to us. And all it really says is either you're eligible, you're not eligible, or we require additional documentation to make you eligible. So one of those three statuses can be returned. But that's all that we know. We
Got
don't
it.
actually know like your street address. We don't have a copy of your driver's license. That's all with the KYC company.
Cool. All right, interesting. I mean, yeah, that sounds good. And I knew see we have a couple people in the chat, and one of the main questions that we're seeing here is, why do devs show their faces and you don't? I mean, I know that I've already kind of met you. We were able to talk a little bit beforehand. But I mean, I think it's great to be able to clarify that for people and letting them know exactly, why it is you aren't showing your face for, for your reasonings. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've quoted Richard a couple times on this, and his basic thesis is it's essential to have privacy if you want to function in the world. We're not out here to be notorious, right? We don't want a public profile. We don't want to go on speaking tours. We're not interested in any of that stuff. Like, we just want to make products that work for everybody. And all of that other stuff to do with public notoriety could be considered a distraction for us, right? So it's just not something that's useful. In the case of, or when we're talking about risk associated with interacting with different companies or different contracts, there's been, like major problems with things that have come out recently in the Hex ecosystem where people have been rugged and economic value has been lost. You're not necessarily safe because someone shows their face, right? Like, everyone's seen Do Kwon's face. How much money did he run away with? Right?
Yeah.
Like, this is the case with Mashinsky and everybody else. Like, this is not the standard that we should have for interacting with companies or contracts. Like, we have a US based company. If anything goes wrong with any of our products and services, you can take legal action against us. Like, we can't just disappear. We can't just stop existing and take your funds, right? We don't even own your stuff, right? It's held by the bank account. You have a relationship with the bank, not with us. So, the fact that we don't want to be notorious and we don't want to be visible, it's just a personal thing. It's just a distraction.
Cool. No, that's good to clarify. I mean, a lot of people feel some type of way. Some people are new to cryptocurrency and they don't really know. Some people are even new to business and they don't really understand that. That in the normal sense, like they think that, like how you said, you have to know who you're doing business with. And ultimately, I do understand though. It is a sign. It is a sign of being comfortable with the person that you're going to be doing business with, essentially. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just something you're probably going to get asked a lot. But as long as you're willing to answer, I think you're not going
Well,
to have any
I,
issues.
I tell you what, Paul, what was the last fiat on ramp you used?
The last fiat on ramp I used, I'm not really sure, bro. I think probably some like it was like a Coinbase or something like that. Really an exchange.
Okay. If you saw the CEO of Coinbase in a lineup, could you tell who it was?
I personally can. Yeah.
I don't think anybody else can. I think it's pretty unlikely. Like, do you?
Like the average user, you mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Or let's go back another step. Like, could you pick the CEO of Wells Fargo out of a lineup?
That I cannot. No.
Right. So, like, how important is it really?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, ultimately, it does come down to trust, and I mean, you guys being the new kids on the block, it is something where people feel like they just that when a new company comes around, they feel like they should know who these individuals are. Ultimately, though, I know you're not new to the industry, specifically you, Stoic. I know you've been in the community for a while. I don't know if maybe you want to share a little bit about yourself. How you got involved, how this whole project came to be, and how you got together with OX Coast.
Yeah, sure. So I'm one of the founders at Zero X Coast. The business concept was really my vision, and I just managed to acquire a bunch of talent to put around me to build the products that I had in mind. Weight being one of them, Tide's another that we're still working on, and then obviously the fiat on ramps the third. Um, I got into crypto from listening to Richard and being involved as an ETH miner in 2017. Prior to that, I bought and sold some Bitcoin at a loss in 2015, which was fun. I think I bought a stack at like 280 and then sold it at 230 to start another business. So that sucked. Um,
Yeah, you took
um,
like a what, like a 15% hit there.
yeah, would have
Yeah.
would have been a way better business to just hold the Bitcoin for 10 years. You
Yeah.
know, whatever. Here we are. Um,
Right.
so yeah, like I put some talent around me to build this stuff. Interestingly, like when you're creating blockchain devs or when you're trying to hire blockchain devs, it's really difficult to find people who have a lot of talent and aren't like working on their own project. So you kind of have to pay for them to learn if you're going to create them from scratch, which is kind
Yeah.
of what you have to do. Like, there's just not that much talent available. So we got some guys and we trained them and we gave them courses and we like put them through different testing mechanisms to just get them up to speed before they started building products. But you kind of got to build a blockchain dev from scratch these days, unfortunately, which is like something that you've even got to do in Bitcoin, right? It takes like 6 to 9 months to onboard a new Bitcoin dev, but that's the case in the rest of blockchain too. So that's what we did. We sort of focused on getting 3 or 4 guys that really knew what they were doing or were keen to learn. So that's where we've gotten to in the last little bit of a while. Really, our interest in building things for Pulse Chain is primarily like we just want to make it easy to get economic value there, and we don't want it to leave, right? So, um, our best case scenario is that Pulse Chain launches, it gets much bigger very quickly, and yeah, the Coast stablecoin and the Coast fiat on ramp is the number one way to get onto the chain. But really, our interest is in the chain growing as fast as possible.
Yeah.
So we're trying to create tools and strategies that get economic value on chain, right?
That's great, bro. And I wanted to ask you this. It sounds like you've been in the business world for a while. Like this isn't your first rodeo. I have two questions, so I'll ask this first. Like, as
Sure.
far as like your background in business, not exactly what businesses, and what the names of them are, but more so like in what industry have you been involved in? Like, what type of business have you built before? Because it looks like you're pretty well versed in creating a business and the structure and how everything seems to work.
Yeah, so I've the last 3 projects that I've worked on were sort of multi-year projects for each of them. The first was a business that was providing consulting services to public companies. So we worked, and this is why I have pretty good knowledge of disclosure policy and Reg FD and how you say things online and what you can't say, is
Right.
because I worked in with public companies teaching them how to speak to their investors and how to maintain a good relationship with the SEC when they were doing it. So, like, for example, I would have been one of the people who'd advise someone like a CEO like Elon Musk, hey, bro, stop tweeting. Hey, stop mentioning numbers for things that are coming up in, your production timelines and stuff like this. We were some of the first people who were actually teaching companies how to do that. So that was like corporate finance, public disclosure. How do you do investor relations with public companies? The second business was e-commerce focused, which was more like consumer based, where it was a very niche sort of community, but we were building products for that community and providing kickbacks to the different groups involved. We ran that for about 5 years and then exited it. Did pretty well with it. The last thing I was working on was a peer-to-peer gaming business that was based out of Canada, out of Vancouver. So I did that for a couple of years and did an exit from that too. And then sort of came back to the States and was keen to do something in crypto. And that was when obviously Hex blew up, and then put a bunch of money into that. I mean,
How long was that time gap between like finishing off with the peer-to-peer company and then starting Zero X Coast?
It was about a 2 year gap. It was a 2 year gap. I was
Oh,
working
so it's pretty much
mostly
like
on,
throughout the demic, let's call it.
yeah, like I took some time off and
Yeah.
I just focused on really learning the Hex, or what was going on in Hex, and being very involved in the chats and everything. I took like way too much money and over leveraged myself into Hex like dramatically. I took out interest-free credit cards. I did home equity lines of credit. I sold every Bitcoin and every ETH
That
and
is
every
wild.
single thing I could to put it in, because I had so much faith in the product market fit. And when you have that sort of confidence, it's very easy to do that. I mean, not everybody does, but you have a lot more confidence doing it. I wouldn't
Well, they say
advise.
competence is confidence, and I kind of want to ask you, like, coming into it, I don't want to deviate too much because I do have that second question for you, but coming into like seeing Hex, for example, like what kind of got you excited about it compared to everything else you had already experienced and seen in crypto, Ethereum, all that stuff?
The game theory and the launch mechanics was really it. Um, I I've said this before on stream, like the way to get rich in crypto is to understand launch mechanics and to really like focus on allocating capital to them in the most capital efficient way possible. And sometimes that means pairing capital with others and creating pools. And sometimes it means like really figuring out how to time things. around
Yeah.
holidays or like at different times in a calendar year. But like that's how you really, really do well in crypto. So that's what I've focused on as like sort of my core competency.
That's badass, bro. That's really badass. That's super cool. And so my second question was, considering what you know about business and everything that you've done in the past, what are your plans to scaling Zero X Coast? I know you said you had to train some devs to get them on board, but ultimately, there's still a long way to go. If this company does become what you guys expect it to be, and Pulse Chain becomes what we all expect it to become, and hope for it to become, um, you know, Zero X Coast is going to be a pretty big company. How do you plan to handle that scale?
Yeah, good question. The you Whenever you start a business, you should have an idea of how you're going to get out of the business, and most people don't. Most people can't see the forest from the trees, and they think that they're going to start a business with friends and see how it goes, and they don't think about what happens in 4 years when you want to exit this thing.
Yeah.
The ideal exit strategy for Coast is really that we've built it such that if Richard Hart decides that he wants the vertical integration and a fiat on ramp for Pulse Chain, we're happy to sell, right? Like, Richard, take it over, take all the IP. We'll even sign potentially like management agreements so that we'll just keep it running for a couple of years for him. Like that's the ideal situation here. And so that's why, like, we don't want to be notorious. We don't want to be out there like doing it ourselves. We're more than happy for him to take it over if and when he chooses to. But if he doesn't, we've just got a long-term plan to grow with the ecosystem, right? Like, one of the big things that we want to do is provide our system to other like app developers in the space. So I can't say who, but some very, very notable people who have built software for Pulse and for Hex have come to us proactively and said, "Hey, we'd really like to integrate your stablecoin on ramp into our app, website, DApp, etc." And so I think that the future for Coast will really be not necessarily being that one point where you send new people, but being a technology layer that plugs into all the other tools in the ecosystem,
Right.
so that if you want to do NFTs, there's Coast stablecoin is in your NFT platform. Or if you want to stake Hex, Coast is there for you to on and off ramp into that staking thing. So really, like us being an end-to-end one-to-one business to consumer is not necessarily the best thing for the ecosystem. Like, we want to have it such that if you have an exchange business, or if you are doing e-commerce on Pulse Chain, right? Like, you can use our system and keep your own customers and keep your own brand, right? You don't have to just bounce them out to our website and hope they come back, in a sense.
Nice. Nice. And there's a good question here. Feeds ask, good Q, would it all be based on smart contracts or will there be maintenance? Like, will there be times that the system could potentially be down for updates or things like that? Or would this be a 24/7 operating business?
It'll be 24/7, but because of the fact that it's an interaction between TradFi and blockchain, it has to be based on TradFi rules and
Hmm.
timelines. So I'm expecting that a lot of stuff isn't going to happen over the weekend.
Yeah.
So, you're not going to be getting a lot of volume on or off chain on the weekend, probably more off actually than on,
Yeah.
interestingly. So, yeah, that's sort of the restriction there.
Got it. Got it. And as far as like devs, I'm sure you're looking for them. What are some requirements that you personally have set in place for like a developer that wants to join the OX team? Is it or the Zero X team? Is that something that that you've like created like a almost like a blueprint, something that you're looking for, or you're open to having anybody come on board and learn how to code and grow with you guys?
We're open to having anyone. Even though we have a slightly distributed team, it really works better if you have people working in the same physical location. My preference actually is to hire teams of two. So, rather than hiring single devs, if you can hire a dev team of a couple of people, it tends to be the case that the sum of the parts is greater than the individuals. So, one plus one is kind of three in this case, because you can
Right.
have people checking their code and going back and forth on feature sets, and you tend not to have to do a lot more work as a manager, which is really my role. So I find that hiring a couple of people who have maybe brought a product to fruition previously would be sort of our optimal dev team to bring on board.
Nice, nice. Let's see. I think we have a couple more questions here. If we just going in, he says, "I want some shares, stocks, whatever." Yeah, are you guys gonna? Is there a possibility you guys might go public? Do you think that's something that's in the future of Zero X Coast?
Um, yeah, I think if we were to do something like that, it would make the chances of Richard taking ownership of it significantly reduced and maybe even eliminated. So, like I said, our first preference is to build a very, very good product that if he wants to take it over, he's welcome to. The process of going through uh, with with creating shareholder value in order to go public is probably not something that I'm terribly interested in. Mostly because like that money has to come from somewhere, that value has to come from somewhere, and
Right.
if we were to do that, we would really be just sucking economic energy away from the users of Pulse Chain into our own pockets and then towards our shareholders, such that they could then get an exit when we went public. I don't know that that's in the best interest of the ecosystem, frankly.
Mm, okay. I mean, still, I mean, this is a really good answer, man. I really like that. It seems like you have everything pretty much like looked into, bro, and it seems like you're like a very well-versed guy. And I think if there's anyone that's pretty much leading this fiat on ramp and off ramp kind of system, it's cool that it's you, bro, because it looks like you have a lot of knowledge on this thing, um, and yeah, I respect it, bro. I do a lot of business myself, and I'm still a student to the game. I'm young. I'm looking to like learn from people and stuff, and I'm definitely learning a lot from you. So I think this is a really valuable conversation we're having because there's a lot of people out there who want to get into the business world of cryptocurrency, but they don't know how. Um, you know, People kind of get involved with crypto mainly just thinking that I can buy an asset or invest, but ultimately there are business opportunities that can sprout from being more involved with blockchain development. And yeah, like is that you feel like that's something you can add some value on, the sense of like actually growing businesses in that world? Like how has that experience been for you from maybe building a business in like the traditional world, maybe dealing with, like, for example, in your consulting firm, dealing with normal people versus building for a cryptocurrency or for blockchain?
Building for cryptocurrency and blockchain can be a lot easier if you choose not if you like have blinders on, right? If you don't think about the regulatory impact of the products that you're creating and you just have blinders on and you're just like, oh, it's the code and nothing else matters, you can make products in blockchain pretty quickly. The problem comes when you want to interface at all with the regular TradFi world, or you
Right.
have regulatory burden that comes from either a state or a national regulator,
Yeah, which
right?
at some point is gonna come. It's gonna be a part of the conversation because not everything can be fully immutable and like trustless. You can't have that technically.
Yep.
There needs to
Yeah.
be some things that require trust from a company, someone that has some type of control over something.
Yeah, typically there does. And I mean, I get concerned about watching certain people in the Hex ecosystem who are very clearly putting expectations of profit out there into the world, and they shouldn't be. And I think it's disingenuous and I think it's irresponsible. So as much as we can, we're not going to do that. And it requires like a level of self-discipline to not do those things, right? Because it's
Right.
so easy for me to just go out there and talk about all these great features that we're building for something and by definition make it a security. So it's the hard thing. It sucks. Like it would be so easy to do these pump and dump things and be unaccountable, but ultimately, is that a good thing for anybody? No, it just lines our pockets in the short term and then ruins your reputation long term. So if you've got a long-term vision for how the ecosystem works, you have to be a good actor in it. And I think that comes with, or that requires you to be very diligent about how you say things and who you say them to.
Definitely. Definitely, man. I mean, I think I've squeezed a lot of information from you thus far, and I know our time is short, so I definitely want to get as much questions as I can in. And one thing to clarify, I know the fees on there's fees currently. Of course, it is a for-profit business that you guys are running, but what are the fees going to look like for this fiat on ramp and off
Yeah,
ramp?
I mean, I might as well be pretty transparent about this, right? Like, this is probably not going to make us a lot of money at any time in the near future. There is a get started cost here for us. And so, just to be clear, like, we are not going to do a sacrifice. We are not going to ask for a cent from the community. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
Certainly for the fiat on ramp stablecoin project, right? We're just not going to do that. It's not a part of our ethos. But what that means is that we have to pay for all this stuff ourselves. So in order to get enough economic value onto chain, we're probably going to have to come up with a way to float $1 million to be able to back CST, to get it onto chain, to get it paired with everything else. But that's not even the biggest cost. Like, you've got insurance costs associated with this that aren't borne by your service providers. But then you've also got service provider fees, right? So we have hosting, we have compliance, we have KYC, we have ledger software, we have bank account information or bank account providers, we have payment processors, merchants accounts. You're talking about an enterprise here just to get started of something like 400K a year in software costs before salary. And we've got a 6-person team in terms of developers, right? So
Yeah.
the cost to get going here for anybody is really significant. So, like, we wouldn't be doing it if we weren't very, very serious. We wouldn't be doing it if we didn't have anybody's best interests in heart. And so when you think about the amount of money we have to outlay just to get this thing up and running, um, you would think that we would be out there trying to charge as much in fees as we can, right? You would think that we would want to recoup it as fast as possible, but that's not actually the case. Like, every dollar that we take off a user getting onto Pulse Chain is a dollar that's not circulating on Pulse Chain. And so we don't want fees to be high. We don't want to be charging 18% like Simplex and those other providers, right? We want your dollars to get from your bank account to Pulse Chain, and fees are just another form of friction that stops
Why do
that.
they charge 18% though? Like, do you think is it because of this massive overhead that they have to charge those 18%? Is it just greed on their end? Like, what do you think that is?
Well, so with Simplex, a lot of people don't realize that it isn't actually Simplex that charges the fee. It's the reseller of the Simplex integration that sets their own fee. So basically, what you have is a situation where every different DApp provider that plugs into Simplex probably runs A/B testing on the fee structure that they can afford to run with their users, and then they just look at the drop off rate in people converting. And if people are still converting at a 16% clip, then they'll keep charging it.
Mm, that's huge. And so you're 4% versus their 18, 16%. Some are maybe like 12, 10, depending on how much you're swapping. It's a big jump. It's a very big jump. And so why do you feel like people will be more attracted to CST over any other type of on-ramp? Do you think it's simply just the fees, or are there other feature sets that you guys are bringing to the table that would ultimately make it a better product to use?
So the big selling points for CST are that we don't custody your asset in your bank account. It's your bank account, it's your fiat. We don't custody your asset on chain. It's not in our wallet, it's in yours. And our fee structure is really just a loss leader to try and cover expenses. In fact, something that people don't realize is that, like, when we speak to regulators about why we're not a money transmitter, one of the key things that we explain to the regulators is, here is our cost of doing business. Here is what we're expecting to charge users. The difference between the two is negligible. Like, we're not trying to make this a system where we get rich. And so as a result, we have a much better case that we're not a money transmitter, interestingly.
Right.
Um, in addition to that, I'll just touch a little bit on, like, the different trade-offs you have with fiat on-ramps. So you can use something that is going to be like 18% on Simplex. The thing about Simplex, though, is that, like, you're not necessarily buying just stablecoin. You can buy other things, but that makes you a securities broker dealer. And so the flexibility of being able to buy multiple assets means there's a higher regulatory burden on that group. And so that's why they're charging more for that service. But you have the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Where you have a centralized exchange or a Coinbase or a hosted wallet where, yeah, you can onboard to them for free, but they keep you in their ecosystem for a certain period of time to try and lock your economic energy there. And they're able to make income from trading fees. So because we are not able to do that and we don't want to do that, we want all of that to happen on PulseX. We have to be able to cover our costs somewhere. And so because it's not in trading fees, it has to be on and off ramp fees.
Got it. And so, I mean, thank you for that. I wanted to ask you now in regards to the weight token. I'm sure you're getting a lot of questions in regards. So instead of asking you individual questions and, like, trying to pull information out of you, tell us about it. Other than what we already know, as far as like, how to mint it. If you guys want to mint your weight, and maybe you sacrifice for some of the sacrifices that allowed you to be eligible for some weight token. Link is in the description as well. But what can you tell us in regards to it? Is there any extra information you can give us?
So it's a disappointing question. Sorry, it's a disappointing answer to the question every time I
Yeah.
have to give it, right? Like this is the area where disclosure is important, and why I mentioned that earlier is it would be so easy for me to come on and just talk about major feature sets that we're building, if we were doing that, but I can't say any of that, right? And
Can you say that there's a link to weight token and the exchange? Excuse me, not the exchange, the on ramp.
I can't.
Can't
No,
even say that.
no.
All right. Is it safe to assume? I mean, I don't know. It may be safe to assume that there's something connected. 'Cause technically, I mean, as someone, this isn't you speaking here. This is me speaking. As someone from the outside looking in, considering that the asset was made from the same team, and things like that. I think there is a possibility. Hopefully, there's a possibility. I mean, I have my own bag, and I mean, I'm considering getting some weight, but knowing more information about it would ultimately um, be the big decision for me to be like, okay, this is something that I can highly benefit from having.
Well, I think you just defined it right. Having more information or getting more information from me
Yeah,
might very well create an expectation of profit. And
there
so
you
that's
go.
why I can't do it.
Correct. So that's why you can't say it. No, it's good, man. I mean, you're very well versed. I think you're on Richard level for sure. Maybe well, really, you're on your own level, right? You can tell that you're someone who's very educated in this space. So, but you do listen to Richard, right? To some extent, Richard is like a mentor to you, and you've learned from him.
Yeah, I think I've taken really good core concepts from Richard on, delayed gratification and allocation of capital in the right ways. Understanding, I mean, once you really learn that all business is a waste of time and you might as well just invest your money and your time in
Yeah,
crypto because you can't get those gains anywhere else. Like where are you going to create a business that does a 9200x? Like even Amazon hasn't done that, right?
yeah.
So you if you can't do better than Amazon with a business, and you can do better than Amazon with crypto, you might as well just do crypto.
Yeah,
Um,
ultimately, I see the value there. Like I think when as a young kid, like my goal once again was always to be financially free. I did have goals for how much money I have. I have goals for how much money I want to make now. And as far as getting there with the fastest route to getting there would ultimately be crypto. That's what I see it as. But there's a passion that drives your life. Ultimately, there's something like we're alive for a reason. I feel like there needs to be something that you do that ultimately moves you forward. Like as a man, there you can't just be hoping a coin goes up, for the rest of your life, and be wealthy and all this stuff. Like you can live a life like that, but I think there's nothing glorious about it. I think as a man, we look for ways to um, have our passions drive us forward, create, innovate, and ultimately help other people. And so I think, yes, though the business world may not be as lucrative as holding an asset, there's still a lot of upside to starting a business and doing something as positive as this.
yeah, it's a good way to think about it. I I tried to get as many people into Hex as I could, and I failed miserably. And I was so upset with it
Same.
because, yeah, because like, 2 years into it, all my friends were looking around being like, "Well, we're struggling with our mortgage payments and, this pandemic stuff's hit us hard and whatnot." And I was just like, "Look, I really wish you guys had listened to me back then. I understand why you didn't, but
Yeah,
if you had, we'd all be retired. Wouldn't that be
correct.
great if we were all just done?" And unfortunately, that's not the case. So when Pulse Chain came around, I literally felt a moral responsibility to make sure that my friends and my family and everybody loosely associated with me didn't miss out this time around. So that's why I created the investment pools so that we could put cash into both those sacrifices. And that's why I've spent an inordinate amount of time, on the phone with onboards, making sure everybody's doing it right and getting into the space. It's obviously a little bit more difficult in a bear market and stuff, but you're
Right.
right. If you take the opinion that a business is not a business to make money, a business is a business in this case to allow the ecosystem to flourish and to allow people that I know and I'm affiliated with to get their money from the bad things into the good things.
Right.
So if you take that as your moral responsibility and the purpose of your business, then it's not about making money and you don't have to worry about 18% fees. 4 will be just fine because that's not the ultimate goal. You know what I mean?
Correct, correct, and it really speaks on who you are as a person because taking on something like this, like you mentioned it yourself, like I mean, you're already retired to a certain extent. We had a little conversation about the word retired and whatnot, but ultimately, yeah, like you are bringing more problems into your life. You are having to go out of your way to do certain things to kind of make this happen. But what do you feel like is that driving force for you? I know you mentioned it a little bit in regards to you saying that it's going to bring more adoption, but as an entrepreneur, I think it's safe to say you're an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, I don't like the term
You
personally,
don't like the word,
but yeah,
but
sure.
in its definition, like someone who starts businesses and works and like pretty much that does what you do.
Well,
like what's that
actually,
driving force for you?
well, like I said, I think in this particular instance with this business, it was originally how do I get my friends involved, and then it was like an extra layer of abstraction. Hey, there aren't good tools here. There's the potential for people who, even though I don't know them personally, there's
Yeah,
like I feel a moral responsibility to them too. So we have to create good products for people. It's kind of like when Richard talks about, getting the money from people into the thing that looks like a scam but isn't.
yeah,
That's kind of the same concept, right? Like we have to get money from people into good things and away from bad things. And every time I see like a friend of mine who bought bloody Shiba, I
bro. If I
cringe
had a
and I
dollar
worry
for
about them.
every person that told me, "Oh, I bought Shiba," and I'm like, "Bro, buy Hex." Like, come on, or like it's not financial advice, right? But I tell them, I'm like, well, at the time, it's just me telling people that I care about, like, yo, do this to get involved with this. It's funny. I had maybe like two or three buddies of mine that put money into Hex. And bro, I mean, they put in like a couple $1,000s, and it turned to for one, it turned over to a quarter million. The other one made like almost $1 million on the investment. I mean, we got in relatively early, not super early, but enough to get a 200%, 200 and something percent gain. And it was nice to see what it did for them. But then you have the friends, like you have to have those tough conversations with the individuals that didn't. And it's almost like you don't even want to bring up the conversation anymore because of the fact that like if you do, it's almost like throwing it in their face. The good thing is we have more opportunities to do it. Like how you mentioned Pulse Chain, Pulse X coming around. Those two, I definitely took your approach and I doubled down on making sure everyone got involved. And I want to ask you a little bit. You mentioned pools, right? I know you're pretty knowledgeable in regards to the to how things are launching and the benefits of doing them. If you can kind of just explain so some people can in here learn like what was the benefit to you pooling with your group of friends and actually doing this type of system.
Yeah, there's a couple of benefits. When we first found out that Pulse Chain was going to have this multiplier effect in the sacrifice points, it became pretty obvious pretty quickly. Like you need bigger amounts of capital pulled together in order to really maximize your bonus. I
Hmm.
actually thought that the bonuses were going to be bigger than they were. I didn't realize it was going to be only a 2.5x. I thought it might be as high as a 10x, but irrespective, it's still an outsized return. So like
Right.
there's under those conditions, like we raised money from about 60 or 70 people in Pulse and PulseX, slightly different groups of people for each.
Yeah.
But we raised a lot of money and we did it with traditional mechanisms because it was so much more capital efficient to have everybody together rather than, hey, you tell 60 people and they all get in and they've all got a 1.3x multiplier instead of a 2.1.
Right.
I think we've got a 2.14, 2.15,
That's
something
sick.
like that.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did a pool too for PulseX. We got like a 1.37, something like that. It wasn't too much, but we definitely, it was
Yeah.
sizable.
Well, so the thing about that was that if you're taking money from people who already have Hex, what I'm about to say wasn't useful. But because all of the capital that I was raising to do this came from real world, what we were able to do was just front run the Hex price as well. So we started just moving money into Hex early down at about 3 cents, dipped below there for like a couple of days. And so we rode that up to 6 cents as well. So the amount of capital that we actually put in and the amount we sacrificed was almost a 2x on that as well. So that
Sick.
was the key thing is like, can you get a bigger multiplier, but can you raise more money earlier from real world in order to get into Hex to pump the price too? So that's what
You're a
we
good friend. You're a good friend, Stoic.
I, I tried to take care of everybody, man. It was a nightmare. But this is actually something that you should look into in terms of business stuff.
Yep.
I'll be clear, like this isn't going to make you any money in the short term. But in
Right.
terms of onboards into Hex and onboards into crypto generally, check out the legal mechanism in the US called an investment club. Investment
Okay.
clubs allow you to pool resources together from unaccredited investors, and that is the key thing. Because if you start like a venture fund or a hedge fund or something, right, you
Hmm.
have to have offering documents, a private placement memorandum. You have to be registered with the SEC or and file a Reg D exemption, right? All this complicated stuff. But if you're an investment club, then you can get together with people with a few $100s, few $1,000s, and you can all invest together in single assets. And you, Puello, as a manager, can be an administrator that isn't compensated, right? Doesn't make fees or anything in there,
Right.
but you handle the pool of money for everybody as long as everybody's involved in the investment decisions. So let's say you get 10 friends together and you have 10 grand. Well, you can decide between the 10 of you, okay, how long are we going to stake this for? Should we use a native hex stake, or should we maybe think about using an HSI with Hedron? Okay, if we use an HSI with Hedron, should we sell it for ICOSA? And as long as you're making those decisions together, you've got a bigger pool of capital, you've got more people involved, you've got like experience as an individual, kind of like as a fund manager. And yeah, you're
Right.
not compensated for it, but you're taking care of all your friends. So that might
Correct.
be something that you should look into. I think a lot of people in Hex, in terms of onboards, would be better off using that mechanism than anything else.
So I technically did start an investment club by definition. I did it with PulseX, and that's kind of what I did. I gathered a couple buddies in, and I said, "Yo, guys, look at the bonuses, look at the benefit that we're
Yep.
gonna get from being able to just pool our money together." And a couple of them did decide to pool with me, so or to join the investment club, better said, right? And it worked out. And you're 100% right. I think it was a overall, it's a great benefit. Just not just so much in the sense that we were getting more, but in the sense also the simplicity behind it too. The fact that I didn't have to teach everyone individually what it
Exactly.
was that we were doing. It saved a lot of time and says, look, bro, just buy it, send it here, and then we'll explain later exactly what we're gonna go ahead and do.
And it
So
removes
it
a
does
bunch of
save a lot of
risk
time.
too. Tons of
It
risk
does.
goes away by doing that. The risk that your buddy accidentally clicks on the wrong 1 inch link and accidentally swaps with a fraudulent front end or something like that. You know that that's not going to happen to them. And when you start dealing with the people that we were dealing with the amount of money, like it's a little bit stressful. You're like, oh, okay, my buddy's put in 200 grand. I'm kind of worried that he's out there doing crypto stuff and he doesn't know how to, right?
Yeah,
And oh shit, I got him involved in this. That's not good, right? So it,
definitely.
it defrays a lot of that anxiety as well for them and for you.
Yeah, it's just really changing the conversation a little bit too. I mean, I think my narrative is always like, "Oh, self custody, keep your own money." But ultimately, I think we shouldn't have almost like that distrust with our own friends. If it's people that you trust, family, things like that, I think it's cool to be able to get people together, especially now in the very beginning that all this stuff is so new to everyone. Maybe in the future where like everyone understands and it's very, it clicks in your head exactly what this stuff is, the power behind it, and it's yourself security. I think for now, I think it's a really great option. Being able to team up with people and just having them pull their money together. I did have another question for you, but what would define an investment club versus a hedge fund, for example? Is it the fact that the manager is making a profit? Is it the amount of money? What would it be?
No, it's two things. An investment club, the manager or the administrator cannot charge fees
Hmm.
by definition. You have to be one of a group of members, and it's kind of like a first among equals kind of deal where you're facilitating everyone else getting things done, but you have no financial interest in doing that, so you can't charge fees. But then the second thing is you can take the club can take money from unaccredited investors. So you don't have all of the disclosure requirements that you would have if you were a Reg D exempt security
Hmm.
or an unlicensed security. So it's really beneficial. And if you did a sacrifice, I mean, I'm not a tax expert, so what I'm about to say, you need to go consult a CPA or a tax professional. But if you structured an investment club the correct way, you might be able to take your sacrifice and declare the entire thing as a loss on your tax return.
Yeah, I heard about that. Something about in regards to like how the sacrifice was like a tax loss technically, because you kind of just gave it away for nothing, and what
Well,
we're
so
receiving has no value.
yeah, so
I
it
mean, I don't really
would
kind of want to speak too much on it because I know there's still some things I don't understand. But you were saying,
yeah, like be careful with it. Obviously, get your own advice. But
right?
the advice I've received is that you can take the whole thing as a loss against other capital investments, or you can just minimize that to $3,000 a year. So if you just want a $3,000 discount on your taxes for forever, you could just take your Pulse X sacrifice, and knock 3K off your taxes, and just roll the rest over for
Hmm.
in perpetuity, basically.
Interesting. Interesting. No, we're learning a lot, man. I appreciate it, Stoic. Honestly, I would love to have you on again. I know it's Saturday, and I mean, you gotta, tend to some things as well. I just want to say thank you, bro, for this great conversation. I think I've learned a lot. There's a lot of things. I'm gonna watch this back, and I'm gonna definitely review a lot of the things we spoke about. But once again, man, just want to say thank you for your time, brother. And yeah, I mean, if there's anything maybe you want to close with, anything you want to share before we tune off, like maybe some of the social information for Weight Token and for 0x Coast.
Yeah, so we're using a pretty standardized naming convention for our products and services. So 0xcoast.com, 0xweight.com are the two things that we've got going right now. In the future, we'll probably use that naming convention for other products as well. So you can find us at 0xcoast on Twitter, and unfortunately Coast 0x and Stoic 0x on Telegram. So feel free to come chat with us anytime, particularly on Telegram. We don't tend to do a lot of Twitter. We're better Telegram people. So if you need support on weight, or if you have questions about the stablecoin, or more specifically, like if you're, maybe a service provider, or you're looking to build some software or something, and you want to plug into Coast, it would be great if we could hear about different use cases, so that we can make sure that we're building the SDK and the APIs in such a way that other people can reuse them and plug into our system. So we would love to hear from those people too.
Awesome. Yeah, team effort. All right, great to hear, man. Well, guys, I appreciate you for joining the stream. Thank you guys so much. Have an amazing Saturday. We'll see you guys on the next one.